For those of you who've listened to me talk before, these are the types of experiences I think that you're going to take with you once you graduate. And you're going to look back on them and say, wow, I'm glad I sat in on that lecture. I'm glad I got a chance to meet somebody like our guest speaker today, because they, not only do they bring some practical experience, but they bring some insight that helps you figure out how to put everything you're learning in school together. Our guest speaker today, Oscar Wong, is the founder and owner of Highland Brewing Company. He was born in Jamaica and came to the States when he was 18, and he attended Notre Dame. And he got a master's in civil and structural engineering and spent the first part of his career, for those of us that are older, first part of your career is like 20 or 30 years. But he spent about 30 years in the engineering world, and then in 1994, he started Highland Brewery as a hobby up in Asheville. And 22 years later, it's more than a hobby, it's a thriving business. The Asheville Chamber has awarded the company the Small Business of the Year, both in 2007 and 2008. They won the award for leadership and hospitality in 2011. And a little bit of insight about Oscar, just was doing a little research, and the two things that popped out. I like beer, so this really hit home. One of his favorite sayings is, in wine there is wisdom, in beer there is strength, and in water there is bacteria. So that hit home. I like that saying, so I think I'll go home and have a couple of beers tonight. And then in describing himself, he says he's like a Pilsner. He's easy to meet, he has complex characteristics, but he has a long tasting flavor. So with that, I'd like to introduce Oscar, and thank you for coming and speaking with the students.
I feel like I'm in church. Everybody's sitting in the back. I know what the ministers feel like. Trying to hang out and get away quickly. I am sorry that I didn't bring any samples. I should have, but everyone has unique experiences that you can use. And they can either be things that you will follow or things that you don't want to do. I'd like to cover some of the experiences I had growing up in Jamaica that really had an impact on what I do. First of all, the idea of quality. When I was just old enough to sit next to a little, I think it was a little coffee table, high table, my folks would have us kids sit around and get the bags of rice would be poured onto the table, and us kids would just pick through and get the clear rice and get rid of the little black and brown specks of things that end up in any kind of bags of commodities. Fast forward a couple years after that, I hated it because it was a Sunday afternoon and I just wanted to play with the kids. Fast forward a couple years, and this poor black lady who lived just down the street complains to my father and said, "Mr. Wong, how come your rice costs half a penny more per pound? I can get it down the road with Mr. Chung for less." His response was, "Fine, go get it." He said, "Nah, I hate having that black stuff in it." And so the message to me was, these are poor people, and yet they were willing to pay a little extra for better quality. They could have gone home and picked out their own stuff, but they chose not to. It made quite an impression on me. The other two things, integrity and respect, my dad showed to all the people he dealt with and all the people he had dealings with. And today, for my first business, which was engineering, I know the brewery, quality, integrity, and respect are the three principles that we move on. Because I'm kind of against doing a lot of rules. You know, we're in a complex society today, and we need to have rules. But I like to hold the rules to basically operational requirements from a safety point of view. But if it's behavior, quality, integrity, and respect, if you follow those, you make the right decision. So, and that's how I've operated my engineering company and my brewing company. Let's go on. After 13 years of engineering, I decided I could do it myself. Went out and ran around. I wasn't as prepared as I thought I was. When you have to make a proposal and you have to get it typed and proofread, and I'm thinking, I didn't think this through. Ran around and thinking, am I crazy? What am I doing? So that's the type of thing you have to think about if you're going to start something. So we've survived it, and then my personal capabilities was in the engineering, as Dean said. And by the way, I went on to grad school because I got an offer and to do it on the cheap. I didn't have to pay a penny. Got an assistantship, and I sure wasn't ready to go work 8 to 5. So I was lucky that way. Anyway, so I started this company, and then my specialty was analysis of the structure or for accident conditions. Then that moved on to not just the structure, but the mechanical systems. Well, a few years into it, they stopped building nuclear power plants, and I thought, what do I do now? So I had to pivot, and I invested in the nuclear waste, which was the next problem. And when it came right down to it, I had several offices around the country. We closed them one by one because there was no work. And in Charlotte, North Carolina is where I sold my engineering, engineering business, but I now specialized in nuclear waste processing. So the lesson is, no matter what you get into, things will change. There's no way they're going to stay the same. You must be ready to adapt. So, and I had 4 years of break. I have to thank my wife for that. She thought it was a golden opportunity for me to take a break. I did. She went back to get her master's in counseling, of all things. I always wondered about that. But so 4 years into it, I'm introduced to an award-winning brewer who wants to start a brewery after being home for 4 years. She was ecstatic, and then she would have been so happy, regardless of what it was, for me to get out of the house. So it reminds me that for those of you who are kind of young to think about this, but you know, you're married for love, hopefully for life, but not for lunch. And it can be so true. So we got started. Now, in starting up Highland Brewing, we're the first legal brewery in Asheville since Prohibition, and we had a lot to deal with. They'd not had any kind of a brewery since the 30s. The regulatory folks didn't know what to do with it. They wanted, is it dangerous? Would it stink? Would it, you know, all the questions. So it was an uphill battle in dealing with the regulatory folks. So, and that's another lesson when you, no matter what you get into, look at the rules related to that business. There are always rules. And if you get that behind you, then you'll have a better shape. But at the same time, don't think that you can think it all through. Stuff's going to come out of the woodwork. Be prepared to shift gears. You can come up with the greatest plan, work it as well as you can, but things will happen that you won't expect or anyone can anticipate. So be adaptable. Okay? Now, as we started, one of the first things that I ran into was, I think I mentioned last night, a good friend of mine, retired judge, proclaims that I was sampling some of my beer that I was so proud of, and his remark was, Oscar, I think you're gonna go broke trying to sell this swill. Well, today he's drinking it faithfully. And what does that mean? It's getting used to something and having, you know, we gave away a lot of beer, by the way, in the beginning. Because I believe in this concept of taste addiction. If you get, I think in World War II, when we had fake coffee and when they got real coffee, people didn't like it initially. Well, if you're addicted to certain taste, you get used to it. We might not make the best beer in the world, but we give you enough of it, you'll think it's the best beer in the world. So I've worked on that a fair amount. So that's another thing to keep in mind, no matter what you make or do in whatever venture you get into. Be generous, it'll come back, and work closely with whoever your customers are. So, let's see, where am I now? So I get this thing started, and I remember going around town with one of my brewers. We'd have a little 5-gallon sample in the trunk of the car in a cooler. We walk in and ask, you know, we just opened a brewery and we'd like you to taste our beer. We didn't have bottles, you know, just. So if they agreed, we'd run back out to the car, get 2 little cups, run in, and they'd sample and say, oh, it's pretty good, or that's not our kind of beer. Okay. Come to find out later on that this is a very, very illegal activity. However, the statute of limitations is passed, and I talked about it. So, the message there is, you don't break the law knowingly, but you do what you have to do to get people to try whatever you're doing. Whether it's a service or a product, the only way you can do is to get it to the people somehow. So, I don't want to say I don't break the law very often, or try not to. After 2 years into starting the brewery, somebody started with the idea of a brew pub. Now in Asheville in 1998, that was a new concept. We're the first brewery, now we're going to be the first brew pub. Well, a brew pub entails food. My thought about the brewery initially was you concentrate on the beer, how you sell it, to whom you sell it, and you focus on the quality. Well, that seemed like it wasn't enough. We had to go one step further, do a brew pub. It turned out to be a total disaster. It took 2 years to the day when we said, we pulled the plug, we don't know what we're doing. Despite the fact that the top brewer and the top restaurateur in Asheville at the time were the partners with the 3 of us who funded it. So now they're just doing really well in Asheville. And so the other thing is timing. We were a little bit early for that concept, number one. Number two, we expected that this would run on its own because the people who were in it were the best in the town. But they didn't have any kind of investment in it. We gave them a part of it. So that's another lesson. If you deal with anybody, including yourself, you better have your own in it. If you don't have a stake, you won't appreciate it. If somebody else doesn't have a stake and they get a piece of the action, they won't appreciate it. So I'm throwing out a lot of concepts and stuff. I hope that makes sense. So anyway, 2 years, and we cut that off, and then we went back to concentrating on the brewery and keep it going. We sell through distributors. There's a new law that's being promulgated right now where they hope to have the distributors be less in control, and that the breweries would have a chance to change distributors. Whether it goes or not, we've never done it on our own. We've always been with a distributor. But it's a choice, a matter of choice. And North Carolina is a little bit more advanced when it comes to giving a lot of leeway. And that's why there have been now 160 plus breweries in North Carolina alone. Let's see, as far as we're kind of a victim of our success too, because it was bad enough that we had 22 breweries pop up in this state, in the city, of under 90,000. One of the highest ratios of breweries to people that you find anywhere in the whole country. Well, then the big boys came to town, which made it even worse. So we're in the middle, so that we're too big to be small and too small to be big. We have the little guys on it nipping at our heels. We have the big guys sitting on our heads. It's a very uncomfortable position. But we've been there, and we expect to survive and thrive. But we've had to shift gears. And I think that's true with any business these days. You'll never have a monopoly anymore, because information moves too quickly and too widely for you to hold a monopoly in anything. You just have to be quicker, better, faster, and be very special in your area. So you focus on your customer, your product, to the exclusion of other concerns initially. You have to do that. Now, how do you prepare to start a business? Entrepreneurship is a broad term, and it applies to whether you start your own business or you work in a big operation. People who actually do well in the big corporations have some entrepreneurial skill that they will actually apply to the job that they have. If you come in and you do a job and you just stick with it regularly without any broader view of how to improve, not much will happen. You'll just progress slowly. The ones who do well actually come up with ideas. Think of it as your company, your ideas, and what you can come up with. So regardless of whether you start your own business or you work for somebody else, keep that entrepreneurial dream in your head, and it will be good for you. Okay? Now, let's see. So, what does that mean? It means taking risks. You really can't get any rewards without risk. We hear that all the time, but you do have to take risks if you're going to do well in any endeavor. And how do you do it? It's all personal. The level of risk is different for everybody. So think through in your own mind what you're comfortable with. Because if you're uncomfortable with going a certain direction, you might surpass it, you might overcome it, but generally we have temperaments that is an integral part of who we are. And if you go too contrary to that, it just doesn't work. So timing, as I said, with the brew pub, I think of 9/11. Some of you don't even remember that anymore. But can you think of the idea that people who started an airline earlier that year, there's no way you could predict that you would have something like 9/11. So there are always problems that come up that you have no idea that are going to come out of the woodwork. But if you're prepared to adjust and shift, you'll be okay. So it's not that you can make a plan and have everything go just so smoothly. However, it's more important that you can respond, react, and survive when the surprises hit. And there will be surprises. I don't care how you plan, you must be ready to shift gears and to react without panicking. That's one of the things that I see a lot of times where friends of mine would just go crazy because something came out of left field. So, and that's all temperament. I mean, you just gotta work with that. So, coming back to what we're talking about, you join your background. You all have unique backgrounds. Make the best of it. And don't do something that's kind of off track of what you're good at. If you really don't know calculus that well, you probably shouldn't consider rocket science. So keep that in mind. What are you strong at? What are you interested in? And work that into your plan of whatever you do. And that would be to your betterment. It's all well and good to swim upstream and take on the challenges, and you're just so determined. Yeah, it works once in a while. It's rare, so we don't try to work with the rare cases because they're too difficult. Let's see. One of the things is, don't be afraid of failure. One of the things I feel strongly about the US is that you're free to fail. In the rest of the world, you're not free to try nearly as well as you can here. So be willing to take risks. Don't be afraid of failure. You really don't learn anything when you're successful. I mean, think about it. If you do something and it all works out, you really haven't learned. It just worked. But if you stub your toe, something doesn't work, and you learn from it, that's how you grow. You hardly ever learn from success. You learn from failure, so don't be afraid to fail. Let's see. One of the things I would encourage you all to be is to be passionate about what you do. Be proud of what you do. Be persistent in all that you do. And be ready to shift gears when situations change. Now, that's kind of a quick overview of my background and how it applies in my words to you. I'm living an American dream, actually. I have a wife who is, if we're still married in November, it'll be 50 years. My daughter is in charge of the brewing company. And my mortgage is paid off. And I have a cake that never runs dry. So, anyway, actually I'm running a little ahead of time because I don't have a lot of words. I'm worded out, but I'd be glad to take questions. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
We appreciate so much. So if we have some questions, if you don't mind shouting them out, okay? Jane, Frank?
Yeah, can you give us a feel for the size of your operation, the number ship or the people, kind of an idea of how big it is?
Okay. The size of the operation. We were fortunate to purchase the property that we're on. It's an old building that's been reused many times. And now we occupy 90,000 square feet of a 180,000 square foot building. It's situated on 40 acres. We produced 44,000 barrels of beer last year. That's about 1.4 million gallons of beer last year, or maybe 750,000 cases equivalent. So, and we sell from Florida to Virginia and over to Ohio, Kentucky, South Carolina, Georgia, in the southeast, basically. We have 50 people full-time and about 24 part-time that are more associated with the tasting room. So that gives you an idea of what we, and that's another change that's coming in our business. Because of my debacle in the brew pub many years ago, I've been reluctant to get into the food business. However, every single one of our competitors around have a food venue, except New Belgium. And we find that it's, we're what you call a two-beer stop. You come in, you have a couple beers, and you'll go out, go have dinner, do something else. And we're trying to make our location a destination. We have a meadow, we have potential for, we've had disc golf, and what else? We have ideas to build it up so that it's more of a destination for people. Now on Friday nights, families show up. We have a family get together with out in the meadow, and a lot of times you'll have more kids than adults. So the young families, and I'm very proud of it, because when our kids were growing up, finding somewhere to go meant babysitter and arrangements. And here, the family comes, mom and dad have a beer or two, maybe a pizza from the food truck, and the kids are running around all over the place and having a grand old time. They go home, go right to bed, they're tired. It's wonderful. Wonderful. Darren?
Thank you, Mr. Wong, for being here. My guess is that there have been many new entrants into the marketplace, especially in the retail marketplace in recent years. And I'm sure that's impacted sales across the industry. Can you share with us what you might be thinking about the trends are in that flattening revenue curve, and how firms like yours might address that flattening revenue curve?
Okay. Did you all hear the question? Okay. Several levels. As far as the industry is concerned, we are now growing at 4 or 5%. We used to run in the teens and sometimes low 20s. In fact, our company ran through the same thing. Last year was just under 6% growth, and we were used to the teens and sometimes even higher than that. The overall industry is slowing down. At the same time, more breweries are coming online, and it's becoming very local. We use the term hyper-local. Every corner, every neighborhood now has a brewery, and it kind of goes back to the old days when they had, the brewery and the pub was the community gathering place. There was no cell phones or newspapers, or that's where people gathered. So it's changing so that we really need to shift gears and look at how do we continue to survive in this milieu. So flattening of the total volume, an increase in the number of breweries. So what do? What I mentioned before is that we need to come up with new beers constantly, which kind of is tough because new beers mean new packaging, new names, new approvals, and then it lasts for a couple of years. But we see we have to do it. Engaging the public at the brewery is a new phenomenon. In the old days, breweries made beer, shipped it out. So the pubs. There is, nationally, the restaurant industry has suffered because of that. Because they find that they're going to the breweries more. As far as, so the shift is to have, you know, the analogy I could say is we have investment banking, we have banks, and we have brokerage houses. They all get into each other's business. That's what's happening in the brewery business, in the restaurant business.
Follow-up question, what skills and knowledge do you suggest that these future professionals acquire as they go forth into the business world?
Okay. One of the first things you should get an idea of is how to read a financial report. Get an idea of what are the numbers related to the project or the endeavor you're getting into. Understand what you need for loan requirement, cash flow. Just understand how to read a financial report. And once you, and that's a basis for making your business plan. Now I have to say that when I first started my first engineering business, I didn't have a business plan. I just thought, hey, I can do engineering, I'll go find some work. It's just like a lot of restaurateurs that I can cook, I'm gonna go, and those are the ones that don't make it. I was lucky. So, know your industry that you're getting into. Check into the regulatory requirements, because that sometimes will trip you up. If you don't know enough about a certain industry, I guarantee you there'll be some rules in there that'll surprise you. A lot of them don't make sense, but because times change. And when we talk to our legislators, they say, well, no, the regulatory folks, they tell us, this is what the rule says, and we have to follow the rules. It doesn't make sense, but we have to follow it. How do you get it changed? You go to the legislator and you get the rule changed, and then we'll follow the new rules. So study the rules related to your endeavor, know to read a financial report, and I think those are two key things.
Thank you.
Have you ever thought about going overseas, like to Asia or other countries?
Have I ever thought of going overseas? Well, we've had requests from Europe and from Asia. We haven't figured out how that makes sense for us, in the sense that when you ship beer, now let me just tell you that beer is made from